Radiata Stories. I love talking about this game. Trieste took influence from Suikoden and created an extremely memorable action RPG. Jack Russell wants to be a knight in Radiata, but fails the entrance exam. However, because he is the son of a legendary hero, he gets accepted nonetheless. This leads him to a journey with goofy but charismatic characters, until eventually they all get caught up in a war between humans and all the other races. So it's up to you to decide which army will Jack join at a certain point of the game. The fun factor here is that you can recruit almost every single character in existence of one army to your party. Each has a different way of recruitment. Some will join automatically, others at certain hours, others you'll have to fight or be at a certain level, etc. Yep, the game has its own clock, with day and night times involved. The controls for fighting seem clunky, but they're not. Just keep in mind you're not playing Ys or something fast-paced like that. Up to 3 party members can join Jack during battle, each with their own fighting style. And also Jack can use 4 types of weapons, and he'll gain skills depending on which one he uses the most. Dude, this game is seriously the definition of a criminally underrated game. It's super fun and unique, hard to compare to anything else out there. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky 1 and 2. This is a game cut into 2 parts, originally released on Windows in 2004 and 6 respectively, but only in Japan. Ports were then made to the PSP, and that's when Xseed acquired the localization rights, so they released both PSP and PC versions worldwide in 2011, though there was only one physical version for the first game on the PSP. A third game was released only on PC, and even though it's canon, it's not really necessary to fully understand the other 2. This marks the start of the nowadays popular Trails series. I call these 2 games underrated because, given the fame of Trails of Cold Steel today, people just keep on wondering where it all started. Well, it started here with Trails in the Sky, but then, since the games are very heavy on text and dialogue, most gamers believe it will take them forever to beat. That's only true if they want to do all the side quests, since the main story only takes about 40 hours each chapter to complete. We fans keep telling newcomers to start with these 2, but half of them just won't listen, which in my opinion makes them automatically underrated. How can they seriously miss this excellent masterpiece? It's a pretty balanced game, perfect for beginners, with an amazing story and strong character development. And that turn-based battle system with a little touch of strategy is simply wonderful. I hope you give these 2 games a chance. They aren't hidden gems, they're very well known RPGs nowadays, but most people just refuse to play them. I am Setsuna. I never felt Setsuna was supposed to be the second coming of Jesus Christ. I say this because everybody had their expectations all the way up to the sky when this was announced. It was never supposed to be a AAA Chrono Trigger successor or anything, and you could tell from the trailers it was merely a love letter to classic turn-based JRPGs. So without expecting anything, I played it and fell in love with it immediately. I believe it didn't get the ratings it deserved precisely because of those high expectations. If you go into this game thinking only that it looks pretty and that it's turn-based, chances are you'll appreciate it way more. And it works wonders for beginners since it's balanced, it's easy to understand and get into, and it progressively starts getting more challenging, but with a natural pacing. You will have to grind a bit at some point, especially near the end, but didn't I say this was a love letter to classics? And those classics were all a bit grindy at least, so that's okay. Nowadays you can find this game on Switch, PS4 and Steam. There was a PS Vita version, but it never came out of Japan. Wild Arms 2. Wild Arms 2 is not Wild Arms 1 Part 2. That's the reason why many fans of the original disliked it. They wanted the same charm with more Western-like themes and less science fiction. Wild Arms 2 did the opposite, but still retained the Wild West influence around its core. Yeah, I belong to a minority who believes this is a much better game than the original, but both games are pretty much awesome. I just thought the story here was wider, with more characters this time, each with a strong background, so the development just felt improved within the plot itself. Once again, you gotta finish each of the 3 main characters' prologues in order for them to join together on the main quest. Other important and very interesting playable characters will join along the way. A secret organization called Odessa is trying to conquer the world, but the characters here form a resistance group to fight them off. We got now larger sprites and map with better graphics, but the controls and interface are the same. Combat in Wild Arms 2 is pretty much a small evolution from the original game. They're entirely rendered in 3D, but other than that, it's regular turn-based with the use of arms, the guns of course. Overall, I just felt the same as with Arc the Lab 2, a sequel that improved everything and simply got me more invested. Tales of Grace's F. Another popular game, but not rated as highly as some of the others out there. Usually the love goes for Xillia, Vesperia, Symphonia, Abyss, maybe Berseria. Rarely Grace's gets mentioned as one of the best, and I think it is. No other Tales game has such a unique battle system, highly technical, hard to get into but very exploitable once you understand it. Yes, this game is brutal, perhaps the hardest Tales game out there, but winning here is so satisfying that you'll want to master that combat as soon as possible. A beautiful story awaits you, told within 3 time jumps from kids to teens to adults. All the while the mysterious girl Sophie seems to be in the middle of it all. So you can only imagine the truly strong character development there is, considering you follow these characters all the way into adulthood. The Tales games always have their own medieval-style modern universes with small science fiction elements. Grace's delves into the sci-fi part a little bit more. So overall, as a Tales game, it's such an experience like no other, and therefore criminally underrated, way above most of the others in this list. Arc the Lab. This one can be found in the Arc the Lab collection. Another game that's on its way of becoming a hidden gem cause no one cares about it. It's short, it's fun, it's balanced. Sure, it can be grindy at times, but that's normal in this genre. I like how the story is original, but not too pretentious like other RPGs. Basically, Arc is searching for his father, but along the way he meets Kukuru. She's from a sacred clan. Upon helping her ignite an important flame, he dies. Then he's resurrected by a powerful guardian that reveals a dark secret to him related to his father, which gives him a reason to join Kukuru and help her on her quest to save the world. A grid-based tactical RPG that can easily be a great entrance to them. A wide cast of characters, each with different personalities and reasons to join Arc on his quest. There's magic spells and abilities you can take advantage of against your enemies. I think it's a great and criminally overlooked RPG, probably because it got such a limited release by Working Designs. Underrated because it was huge in Japan, but barely anybody played it in North America. Arc the Lab 2. The sequel is much better, everything done right in the first game was carried over and improved, everything wrong was gone for good. Main story is longer and the world is larger, since now you can manually visit several places out there. It's a direct continuation of the events in the first Arc the Lab, but it introduces a new cast of characters that will join the others of the previous game. A new part of the plot will follow mercenary Elk, who takes on different jobs for the Hunter Guild. Upon a chance encounter, he starts getting dragged in the Arc story with unfinished business. How the stories connect with each other here is really interesting. So it's a better and more polished plot this time. Gameplay is the same, but it's more engaging and less grinding, although I do recommend leveling up as much as you can, especially near the final dungeon. Plus, changing scenarios and parties quite often made the plot 10 times more dynamic than before. This game is also included in the PS1 collection and it's underrated for the exact same reasons as the first one. Lufia 2: Rise of the Sinistrals. In chronological order of the Lufia series, this is the very first game and an excellent one. People talk often of the giant Squaresoft RPGs being the best on the SNES, but rarely do we see the praise going to Lufia 2. In my opinion, it's on par with Chrono Trigger and it's one of the best JRPGs of its time. You play as Maxim and friends in a long quest to stop the Sinistrals, a race of evil super beings wanting to take over the planet. If you play the first Lufia, then playing this explains a lot of its background plot holes. The controls, gameplay and interface are superb here, as is the battle system. It plays much better than in the first game, now letting you control the action of each character in your party. I love the sprite animations and the enemies appearing big on the screen, especially the bosses, which are epic. It's quite balanced, but it does have its challenge, not to be underestimated. The real hardcore part comes from its puzzles, which can be nerve-wracking, I guess, but there's no excuse around them nowadays, what with the internet and all. I've praised this excellent game lots of times before, but I still feel it deserves more recognition, enough to be considered by most people as one of the best on the Super Nintendo. Valkyria Revolution. Critics destroyed this action RPG mostly for two reasons. One, because they didn't know it was a spin-off, they wanted to treat it as a mainline game, all of those being tactical RPGs. Mediavision and Sega wanted to make a spin-off. Does it have to be strategic? Aren't a lot of spin-offs like this changing battle mechanics to differentiate themselves from the mainline titles? The second reason is because its gameplay mechanics aren't stellar. Even understanding it as an action RPG and accepting it as such, it does present some relevant issues. The balance of this game was overlooked by devs and testers alike. Playing it on easy offers zero challenge. While normal feels like a mixed bag, often it's just as easy, but some bosses are straight up broken and show a sudden change in the AI behavior for the bad. Other critics trashed the story, but I of course strongly disagree with them. I personally think this is a terrific narrative with rich characters and mature situations. Graphics and music are almost objectively untouchable, anybody crapping on them is very questionable. Anyway, I'll admit this isn't the best Valkyria game, nor is it a masterpiece, but the scores it received were way more punishing than reasonable. Lunar Silver Star Harmony. Speaking about ports, here's the last one for the all-time classic Lunar, the Silver Star, and it is in my opinion the absolute best version of it to play. In fact, it's a full remake, not just a regular port. Story remained untouched from the PS1 release, but they added a new amazing feature, a small prologue containing the prequel to the series, where you actually get to control the legendary heroes named in the main story. The ones who fight the Dark Wizard Eiffel and save the previous incarnation of the goddess Althena. The rest of the plot is still about Alex starting a journey with his love interest Luna to become the next Dragon Master. I say this is the best version to play, not only for its neat addition of that short intro. I love the sprites in the original versions, but here they look beautiful and I really like the animation style. Another important thing is the rebalanced difficulty. Original Sega CD version is overflowing with random encounters, decreased on the PS1 port, but some difficulty spikes were now there. This PSP remake fixed everything and made it way more balanced and therefore more fun to play. Underrated because not too many people seem to agree with me on this, as they still prefer the classic PS1 version over this one. Project Cross Zone games. So here are two games that have left a lot of fans in a desperate need for a third one, including me. They're massive crossovers that include several characters from different companies like Sega, Capcom, and even Namco itself. Most characters we know them from different games and genres, others are exclusive to Japan. That was one of the reasons why the first game in the series, Namco Cross Capcom on the PS2, was never localized. They're strategy RPGs about original protagonists trying to fight off the Shinra organization, as well as helping characters from other universes to get back to their worlds. However, these aren't simple grade-based tactical games. Characters fight in pairs against a stationary enemy, pressing different buttons to create combos. Each pair can also summon an extra ally to execute a few attacks in order to create even more combos with the other two. Despite being very long and somewhat repetitive, these games are incredibly addicting. My pick for this video is the first one for one simple reason: you have more combos per pair of characters. Sure, that makes battles longer, but since I really like the combat in this game, I prefer it that way. Thank you very much. the Baten Kaitos games. Previously they were only on the GameCube and nowadays are hard to find, kind of expensive. Anyway, first there was Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean, my pick for this video. Origins is a prequel, but the original version was so unbalanced with nasty spikes in there. I hope they were fixed in this remaster. Wings follows Kalas and Shelha joining together for different reasons to fight an oppressive emperor. Story was written by legendary Masato Kato, so you can expect a heck of a plot here. Great narrative and character development. Gameplay is very traditional, but the combat revolves around cards. Played in turns, but with a timer, you have to select a bunch of cards that are randomly available per character's turn. Some are attack cards, others defensive, all in the form of weapons or armor. Others are elemental magic spells, offensive, buffs, debuffs, healing, etc. Sounds random and it is, but trust me, it's exactly what makes the battle so addictive. The interface in Origins is a bit different and more stressful because you gotta choose faster the cards you'll use. Still, both games are clever and original, so yeah, I hope the remasters did the graphics right, cause gameplay wise, they're both must-play JRPGs. Oh, and story too. Eternal Sonata. Meet the beautiful masterpiece on the PS3 and the Xbox 360 that no one played. But if you did, thank you, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Frédéric Chopin himself is sick and bedridden while his family looks after him. He starts having these weird dreams about an extremely beautiful and fantastic world. Sadly though, there seems to be a lot of fear towards certain people that can use magic, like Polka for example. So he decides to travel with her while trying to find out why he seems to be trapped in that world. Sooner than later, Chopin ends up involved in this conflict, which eventually leads to a possible war between an evil count and his citizens. But is this really a dream, or is Chopin in some kind of alternative reality? Eternal Sonata's battle system is a junction between action and turn-based. Every character has a turn inside these fields, with light or dark areas. Depending on where they stand, their attacks will change to the corresponding element. You'll need to move and position your party members and cast a series of attacks or perform a special skill. Timing them is the key to win, as the PS3 version of this game can be quite tough sometimes. With music by both Motoi Sakuraba and Stanislav Bunin on Chopin's compositions, Eternal Sonata can easily become a dream itself for the player. And if not, then at least an overly beautiful experience. Tales of Symphonia 2: Dawn of the New World. Many hate on this entry for its controversial handling of its story progression. It's rare to see bold and negative criticism towards anything else really. One could argue the pacing wasn't ideal in combat since the protagonist takes a bit to fight decently, and the addition of monster recruitment felt out of place for a Tales game, but the resentment collides mostly with Emil, the main character himself, and how the original Symphonia characters were introduced. I've never been able to understand the complaints, and this is coming from a guy that did play Symphonia 1 first. Lloyd is portrayed as an evil, heartless villain at first, but halfway through the game you meet the truth of what's going on. My guess is most people and critics who trashed this sequel didn't even reach that part. They hated on it for that initial follow-up to the Symphonia 1 cast, and I do firmly believe others just hate it because the consensus is negative towards it. It isn't hard to stand up for this game, as I personally see nothing that can condemn it to its lame reputation. It's a great JRPG destroyed by critics who probably just wanted to play as Lloyd in another adventure. I get that. Still, most of the low scores feel way too biased for my taste. To each their own I guess, but it's hard to respect opinions like this. Vandal Hearts. So it's a strategy RPG developed by Konami, spawned a whole but small franchise that died off because, well, you know, Konami. Didn't grow any bigger than that thanks to a lack of proper advertisement and several controversies regarding the game's mature content. Not a story about kids saving the world, but about a group of soldiers betrayed by their army and caught in a sinister political plot. Oh, and the blood spray was nearly censored, but thankfully left untouched. Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre got away with similar plot ideas, but Vandal Hearts didn't quite succeed as much. It's a masterpiece, and not only for its amazing story. A huge deal for me is the dynamics during battle. Mission objectives will be different most of the time, sinking the repetitive nature of strategy RPGs. Maps are carefully designed to keep the player engaged and entertained, trying to come up with different strategies. How to approach every situation is what keeps you fully immersed. I used to think of this game as a hidden gem more than anything. One of the best of its kind, but people know it. It's not really that obscure, just very underrated. It got popular at the late 90s and early 2000s, but Konami decided to change things for the bad with later entries and pretty much kill the franchise for good. Breath of Fire. Yeah, it's one of the most popular too, but let me explain. I feel like most people praise 2, 3, and 4 all the time and always refer to 1 as the meh title, as if it wasn't just as good. For today's standards, they might be right, cause it definitely feels lacking in some areas, but you gotta understand that back then this was a sensational title and the start of this iconic series. Without this first entry being successful, you know Capcom, the rest would never have existed. It's a very traditional JRPG that I often recommend, just keep in mind it was one of the first. Capcom was merely testing the waters of the genre back then, but for its time, the game's actually great. Sure, some difficulty spikes and random encounters galore, but come on, weren't most RPGs back then the same? And I personally feel those 2 flaws were 10 times worse in the second game than in this one. Give this one a try if you can, just to see where this amazing series began. It plays very well despite its so-called defects. Soul Hackers 2. Another indirect sequel with such unfair ratings was this little gem. Just like I Am Setsuna, I feel people were expecting an extraordinary masterpiece when it didn't even look like one from the trailers. It's a great game for sure, but you're probably wondering, first and foremost, why would I recommend a Megami Tensei game when the series is known for being hardcore? Well, it will surprise you to know this game is one of the easiest of them all. Not exactly easy, mind you, but balanced like every JRPG in today's video. The one anybody can start with and have a great time. Plus, I feel its gameplay mechanics, Demon Fusion included, were simplified precisely with that goal in mind, to have this as a great entry into the Mega 10 universe. Don't be fooled by the character design. It's an odd choice for some characters, I admit that, but the story is still intriguing, dark, and mature. No, you don't need to play the first Soul Hackers to understand this one, they're both standalone. You can find this game on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Windows. It's also on Project X Cloud, whatever the heck that is. Phantasy Star Portable 1 and 2. In reality, these are Phantasy Star Universe 3 and 4, and they should have been called that way, but they named them Portable to attract more players to the series, and to emphasize that they were exclusive to the PSP. Both are a direct sequel to the other 2 games on the PS2, with the same characters from before, and some new ones here and there. A few months later, after the Seed alien invasion was thwarted, the Guardians, including your main customizable character, find out that nothing is over. Some really dangerous Seed remain and certain political figures seem to be involved. So starts the quest to put an end to it all once again. If you beat Portable 1 first, you can load your save data onto the sequel to play as him or her again. The story slightly changes to recognize your character as the previous member of the Guardians, but you can also create a whole new one if you want to. Battle system is preferably enjoyed more on the PS Vita, but these are on the PSN for whatever dumb reason, so if you don't want to emulate, you'll have to put up with the PSP joystick. Still, they're fantastic action RPGs with gameplay that truthfully progressed after the first PS2 games. The entire saga is criminally underrated and overshadowed by the online series, so that's why they're here. Wild Arms 5. As the last true Wild Arms of the main series, it's heavily underrated for many reasons. One, mixed reviews just because it continued having the hex battle system from Wild Arms 4. Both games felt different than the first three because of that. 2, because it was a limited release and most copies were part of a 25th anniversary edition that's somewhat pricey nowadays. And 3, because since Wild Arms 4 failed to meet general expectations, most people didn't pay attention to it and lost interest. Well, this is my favorite in the series actually. So Dean and Rebecca live in a small village, classic trope, I know. Upon investigating someplace nearby, they encounter a mysterious amnesia girl, classic trope, I know. But cliches go away once they start their journey to become Wild Arms users, and help Avril regain her memories. Over the course of time, they too find themselves engaged in classism, elitism, and racism, and ultimately in a huge political conflict. I'm telling you, Avril makes the whole story herself. There's a major plot twist once she regains her memories that radically changes your perspective. Now, combat is strategic, yet still with a turn-based soul. You gotta learn where to move your characters to really make things work, because elements play an important role, as important as the combination attacks, which are awesome by the way. Wild Arms 5 is still exclusive for the PS2 and hasn't come out of the shadows it was left behind in, which is the reason why I think it's severely underrated. Grandia 3. Grandia 3 is still my favorite in the series because graphics, battle system, music, interface controls everything except the story. Yuki wants to be a pilot so bad that he's always messing around with airplanes. Finally he makes one work, but his mother boards him and they get into an accident. Together they find a girl being pursued, so they rescue her and so starts a quest. Well, similar to the one in Wild Arms 5 if you ask me. But man, your mom is a party member! How awesome is that? She's the real deal, dude! Not some adoptive woman from out of nowhere! Anyway, plot starts off cliché, but it takes a while to get better, and in the end, it doesn't really offer many unique aspects to it like other JRPGs, which is why it pales in comparison with the story in Grandia 2. The rest is simply amazing. I've stated many times before why I love the battle mechanics so much here, as I believe they perfected what was already awesome in the previous games. Please watch my JRPG Battle System series for deeper and detailed explanations of it. Why is this game so hated? Just because the story wasn't as great as in Grandia 2? It's not a bad story per se though, it's classic JRPG plot, so why? Yeah, the opening song is trash, but so is almost every J-pop intro in this genre in my opinion. Anyway, just play the damn game and decide for yourself if you like it or not. Star Ocean, The Last Hope. Yes, I'm back to defend this game one more goddamn time, I'll be quick, don't worry. It's overhated for reasons I consider dumb, but people are entitled to their opinion like me, so it's okay. However, I think they exaggerate. Nothing wrong with the story and the characters. It's a prequel to the entire series and it explains why people can't live on planet Earth anymore. So they go to space to study other planets and see if they can be colonized. Along the way they meet other alien races and realize the entire universe is at risk. Mostly thanks to a bizarre and mysterious race that seems to be interdimensional. Some tropes are there to give the humorous nature to the cast, but it goes serious when it needs to. Best battle system in the series, but that's again only my edgelord opinion. Graphics are amazing for its time, and I think Sakuraba's music once again is on top. Especially the regular battle theme, which is among my favorites. Anyway, that's it. You know I love this game, so let's move on. Ogre Battle, March of the Black Queen. This is one of those games everybody knows, but no one has ever played. The reason must be that it's a real-time strategy game, and those are usually very niche. It also got an enhanced port on the PS1 a few years later. Here you will control an array of small groups of characters and monsters that will fight under your command. The goal is to travel around these large maps in a story with different routes and endings. It doesn't focus a lot on the plot, but it's there and it's very well written. You need to give each commander a specific route to follow so they can either conquer, save, or destroy a city. If they make contact with an enemy unit, a turn-based battle will start. You can use cards for attacks, buffs, or debuffs. but your characters will act on their own. So creating formations and therefore tactics on the menus is the best you can do. It sounds complicated because of the micromanagement, but trust me, it isn't that complex. Overall, a great game that might not be for everybody, still not changing the fact that it's criminally underrated. Fate Extra. Now that the Fate franchise has become way too popular for its own good, I can safely assume Fate Extra isn't that obscure anymore, especially not since a full remake was announced last year and we'll probably see it this one. Probably. Anyway, the game follows an extremely bizarre plot that centers around a fake virtual school, but with a real tournament, the classic tournament to get the Holy Grail to alter or destroy the virtual reality. But is it really virtual, or is it the real world? I love how the game lies to you at the beginning with a fake protagonist until you end up creating your own. All of this to grasp an understanding of how dark and twisted the plot will be. You'll choose one of the 3 available servants to train them for the tournament. Your grinding sessions will be bound by a daily program with a limited time to train. But don't worry, there's no timer during the dungeons. A rock paper scissors mechanic awaits you during its turn-based battles. You'll need to study and predict the enemy's movements to choose the best counter actions to win. I adore this battle system because the more you fight, the more you learn the enemy's patterns. I love this game, but you probably already knew that, so I don't think I need to explain why I think it's heavily underrated. The Utawarerumono Trilogy. I don't think they're that obscure nowadays, but I believe people have just seen them and that's it. Their visual novel aspects precede them, hence the reason why not many people play them. They're missing out on a greatly developed story with dark and mature twists galore. But yeah, reading is half of the game and you'll spend just doing that, sometimes for an hour or 2 between each mission. Before we get to that though, let me explain. You have to start with Prelude to the Fallen, telling the story of the amnesiac Haku who mysteriously wakes up in an old village resembling the feudal Japan, but with a race that has cat ears and tails. Yeah, sounds silly and it does have its fan service, but man, you have no idea the impactful story you'll be getting into. Mask of Deception and Mask of Truth are the sequels, pretty much one game cut into 2 parts. Story, graphics, characters and battle system are better, but there's more dialogue than before. Playing them in order is indispensable since Deception and Truth spoil a lot of things from Prelude. All of them can be found on Steam, PS Vita and PS4. Steam versions are often on sale as a bundle, so yeah. Anyway, these are strategy RPGs. You move on grids and fight enemies, but with a system based on timing, every attack is bound by a circle or a zooming circle. In Prelude, clicking the button at the right time will make your character complete their combo and attack more than once. In the other 2 games, they'll attack a few times no matter what, but clicking at the right time will trigger a critical attack. I really like these simple yet engaging ideas for what could have been a generic tactical combat. Man, this whole saga is a masterpiece. I wish I could have played them before so I could have ranked them better. Strongly recommended, all of them. Legend of Legaia. Another forgotten gem on the PlayStation is Legend of Legaia. Such a big game, commercially successful when it first came out. It was a talk of RP gamers and it stayed that way for many years to come. But in the last decade, its popularity decreased badly and sent it into a downward spiral of oblivion. Maybe because its sequel on the PS2 failed both in sales and reviews, so the Legaia series died and it never came back. You play the game through 3 main characters' point of view until sooner than later they meet and form a full party. Civilization has collapsed because the Seru, spiritual beings that gave magic powers to humanity, have rebelled against it, so a thick mist starts covering the earth. Therefore, it is the job of our 3 mist-resistant heroes to put a stop to it all and save humanity. Sounds cliché, but trust me, the lore, background and events make it way more interesting. and its battle system is uniquely designed to offer an exit to the stereotype. It's turn-based, but your job is to create different combos with the different combinations of the directional buttons. There are many ways to abuse the system, with consecutive arts being linked. The game's hard, let me warn you, but not insanely hard like some other PlayStation RPGs. Legend of Legaia was a very popular game, highly rated back then. Nowadays, it's underrated because its fame tragically faded away. Lost Dimension. I've called this game a hidden gem before, I've also called it underrated, so which is it? I suppose in my own RPG niche, it's not that obscure anymore considering how many times I've talked about it. Lost Dimension is a strategy RPG, but not a grid-based type. Here you will control a group of characters per battle and they can move freely within a ranged area. They can perform individual attacks, or if an ally is nearby, they can also do combos. I think this battle system is excellent simply because the strategic values rely more on positioning and decision making. Hey, and speaking about decisions, the whole point of the game is to try and find out who's the traitor so they can die and you can move on. Kinda like the Danganronpa series. Pretty harsh, huh? The only ones who can save the world from destruction are these special ops characters, but the main antagonist has trapped them all in this mysterious tower. To advance one floor, one character must die. Now you see why it's criminally underrated, because most of you probably didn't know about it. Suikoden Tierkreis. A demented king is obsessed with fate and is trying to control the world using his ideals. So the protagonist, Sig, the classic small village kid with a few friends as a starting party, yeah, he's your guy here. But of course, he'll eventually become the chosen hero to recruit 108 Stars of Destiny to fight the aforementioned king. It's also the first game in the series to fully base its narrative on the Suikoden multiverse and the idea of many parallel worlds. However, it's a standalone title with no relationship with any other game in the series, apart from being considered as a spin-off more than anything else. It does feel like one as it lacks certain elements from the mainline series, such as the strategy battles and the duels. In Tierkreis, you only control 4 active characters in battle, with an additional one that acts strictly as support. Runes are back, of course, and there's also combination attacks between some characters. Everything else is traditional, as in you go around towns to follow the story, take on quests, and of course, recruit many different characters. The game got some small lukewarm reception at first, mainly for the lack of multiple battle systems, criticized also for the mediocre English dub of some characters, particularly the protagonist. But honestly, if you can get past that, you'll find yourself playing a really solid turn-based RPG. This is definitely a must-play on the system. Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. Ys 2 continues the adventures of adult Christian, who now ends up in jail. Was it a misunderstanding? Is he being framed? He'll have to escape first to find out, mainly thanks to some special powers this mysterious girl Aprilis gives him. But then another adult ends up in jail, so now there's 2 adults? What's going on here? You'll be playing as both every now and then. The first adult in the city, who joins a small group of vigilantes who also have dark and special powers. The other will be all about solving puzzles and escaping from the giant-ass prison he's in. The Ys games are known for being dark, but this one has that edgy feel to it, and some dark themes with the plot twists are there. I think it's the best story in the saga. And gameplay-wise, combat will still be fast-paced and chaotic as you jump around or even fly around the city to find chaos to defeat monsters. And of course, you can switch between 2 more allies at any time to fight enemies weak to them or use their unique skills to reach certain areas. Another masterpiece in the Ys universe, obviously a must-play. Tales of Legendia. I decided to include this one because it gets a lot of undeserved hate, just like Grandia 3. My problem is that I get the contempt against Grandia but not against Legendia. The game feels different because a second team called Project Melphus worked on it. Music wasn't by Motoo Sakuraba this time, instead Go Shina composed it. And it's beautiful, by the way. Wasn't released in Europe and still remains exclusive to the PS2, not even with a digital re-release anywhere. I disagree with the criticism towards its pacing issues. I get that it's annoying to see an immature Senel trying to rescue his sister Shirley over and over again. His attitude isn't really likable at the beginning, but isn't every JRPG of this kind a journey of maturing, bonding, and experiencing things that change the characters' perspectives? Legendia is no different, especially not when it has the best development with profound extra episodes at the end of the game that focus on every single character. The world, the lore, the racism issues, the war drama, the twists of the legacy, it all comes down perfectly crafted in my opinion. A battle system is there to offer the 2D beat-em-up classic experience once again, but it plays much better than the original systems in the first Tales games. Great story, great cast, beautiful music, unique graphics and art style, you still get a good game in the end. Ignore the haters and, just like with Grandia 3, play it and decide for yourself. Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. It's popular, it's classic, you know about it but probably didn't play it. I hope I'm wrong. It's just as good as its massively beloved predecessor. Both games were originally released on the Sega CD, but only the first one got a million ports and remakes that helped it establish its huge cult following fanbase. The second only got one on the PlayStation and that's it. The world forgot about it. The story is charming enough to compare with the Silver Star. Hiro is a young adventurer traveling around with his baby dragon friend and his adopted grandfather, Gwyn. But one day they encounter a mystical woman from an ancient land in the Blue Star. The story then leads Hiro and Lufia to chase after an evil being and stop him from destroying the world. What's cool about Lunar 2 is the journey itself, Lucia's mysterious background and the cast of characters, some of them being from the Silver Star actually. So it's a great charismatic adventure, just like the first game. Why didn't it get the same amount of love? Why was it abandoned by its developers and publishers Game Arts? Not even in Japan it got the same treatment as the Silver Star. I'll never understand, but anyway, that's the reason why I think it's a very underrated game. The Alliance Alive. The world is politically and culturally divided by humans and demons. Demons oppress humans, so your main characters join a small group that wants to stand against them, but the other main characters are also demons who may want to stop that very same oppression in their own way. Written by Suikoden creator Yoshitaka Murayama, this is a great story with many interesting points of view. Like in the old Saga games, you fight in turns and can arrange different formations, but you don't level up. Instead, your characters may gain random stats increases after battle. They also have a variety of weapons they can equip, even though they can break after a while. This can be a challenging game if you don't know what to do, but with the exception of one boss fight, it's balanced for the most part. It's another must-play JRPG out there. Growlancer, Wayfarer of Time. This is the most, or rather the only slightly popular game in the series. The rest of them are pretty much hidden gems. Wayfarer of Time gained some small mainstream attention because it sold more than the others, plus being available on the PSN, and with the PSP being region-free, it helped out a hell of a lot. The nightmares I had with this fucking great game. I adore its battle mechanics, the real-time strategy system with 4 playable characters in your party. I've praised the gameplay before, which also includes a bonding system for different character endings. I've bitched about its obscene difficulty, which varies depending on the type of missions and routes you get. So let me tell you instead about the story. Crevanil belongs to a mercenary group called Artenschwart. He and his pals are soon victims of a devastating event that tears the group apart. Angels are behind this devastation because they're tired of humanity being at war, but they want to wipe out every single last of them. So it's up to Crevanil and friends to find a way to stop them all. Because of its religious theme and dark atmosphere in war, it's a very well written story. And it's one of those where your decisions matters, so there's several routes to follow and several endings. And it's criminally underrated because it almost made it to the mainstream when it should have done so. Drakengard 3. Yeah, it's full of problems, I know. It probably shouldn't be here, but can I explain? Controls are wacky and there's a strong camera issue, but it's mostly mindless hack and slash out there, and it's fun! Well, maybe not that mindless, since the main character can switch weapons and go technical once in a while. Plus, it's a hard game, so you can't just button mash your controller and win. The dragon missions though, I admit they could have been better. The game is funny as hell, however, and its extremely dark and adult humor makes the chaotic controls worth tolerating. Yoko Taro decided to create a prequel to his own universe with a messed up heroine called Zero. She's on a quest to exact revenge on her sisters. Why does she need to kill them? Well, that's the big spoiler of the game. The graphics are gorgeous during the cutscenes, but during battle, a nonchalant frame drop can be experienced. In conclusion, the game probably got the rating it deserved, but I still deem it underrated if only because of the story and characters. Arc the Lad, Twilight of the Spirits. About a year ago I had to give this game the hidden gem treatment in another video, but I keep insisting it's not really one, since it's greater than its PS1 predecessors. It's the most underrated of them all. Karg, a human, wants to join the local vigilante group to help protect his village against monsters and enemy soldiers. On the other side of the world, Dark, a demon, lives miserably as a slave until one day he escapes to exact revenge against humans. Yep, humans and demons hate each other here, so the game's highly influenced by modern society, political issues, and nasty racism. You'll be going back and forth, chapter by chapter, between these two main characters and their respective parties. It's a strategy RPG, but you do not move on grids. Instead, each character has their own movement range and specific attack areas depending on their skills. It's basically a pretty solid evolution carried over since the first games. It's an amazing RPG, one that thankfully was re-released digitally on the PlayStation 4 with upscaled resolution. Either version is cheap, especially the physical PS2 release, so you have no excuse to not play this game. Shadow Hearts 1 and 2. I put them together just so I could fit one more game into this list. Like the PS2 is the mother of all hidden gems and underrated games, so a bunch of them were left out. In any case, these two games have the same main character, one being a direct sequel to the other. Except in Covenant, Yuri joins a bunch of new characters and gets involved in a different conflict. The first Shadow Hearts is dark as hell. It follows Yuri right before the First World War as he tries to fight off a horrible curse inside of him. He can transform into demonic creatures by absorbing the souls of monsters. By accident, he ends up rescuing Alice, who just so happens to be an exorcist. So they start a journey together of running away from a mysterious and powerful wizard. Traveling throughout Europe and Japan, they find other characters who are connected to the war and a sinister plan. Covenant is less dark and they even increase the silly humor and raunchy characters, but it didn't really hurt the main plot. It takes place a year and a half after the events of the first game, now during the First World War. Never mind its goofiness, it still goes on with dark, twisted drama and the conclusion to Yuri's ephemeral ordeal. I don't know why these games never got the attention they truly deserve. It's like they were overshadowed by so many PS2 releases and ended up flying under the radar. They're great, balanced, traditional, and with that truly original battle system you probably already know about. Code Vein. Another action RPG I'm a big fan of is Code Vein. It's influenced by the Soulsborne series but only in combat. The modern Namco sure loves its post-apocalyptic plots, so this is yet another one of those. Vampire-like creatures infested the planet and destroyed it, morphing into monsters, but some that didn't morph and still have mind control are called the Revenants. A small group of them fights the monsters, basically known as the Lost. You will go into long missions to different areas infested by these creatures. Apart from being able to use a bunch of different weapons but only one at a time, you can focus your fighting and skill tree based on different active and passive abilities. You also need blood to do this and to survive, so that's basically one of the goals of the game, to get it. In combat, however, you can use a special skill to attack your enemies doing just that. It's slow and strategic like in the Souls games, so it's obviously tough as nails. But unlike in those games, you have a different party member each time that acts as a companion. I will be a fan of Souls if they focused a lot on their narrative like this one and with a gothic setting no less, but they just don't. Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. The direct sequel to Path of Radiance, another overly expensive game nowadays. This one is getting there, so pardon me for insisting on emulation. Don't look at me funny because I own them. I got them around 10 years ago when prices weren't retarded. Yes, you need to play the first game to understand this masterpiece, sorry. Just like with Tales of Symphonia 2, this one focuses on the harsh consequences of the events in its predecessor. So first, you'll control a new party of mostly new characters that start a little rebellion against the new regiment. Soon, the main cast of Path of Radiance takes over, colliding with this new party. That's all I'll say to avoid spoilers. The gameplay is still as masterful as it was on the first game. Just keep in mind there was an error in localization. Nintendo of America messed up the difficulty and accidentally removed the real easy mode. So playing it on easy means you're actually playing on normal, whereas normal means you're playing on hard. If you understand that, then you'll have a blast playing through one of the best JRPG sequels of all time. Loved Path of Radiance, love the new cast here, love the controls, map design, its clever features, and of course, its completely broken characters. Definitely my favorite RPG on the Wii. Infinite Undiscovery. Here's another action RPG, very overlooked nowadays because it didn't do so well in the reviews. As I always say, just play the games and have your own opinion, never let a critic decide for you. However, it's far from perfect and it does have its own flaws, but nothing that can truly frustrate your experience or anything like that. Story is actually pretty damn good, about a total nobody who gets dragged into a war only because he looks a lot like the leader of a rebellion. Cast of characters and their development is ordinary but truthful at the same time. That gives it a big feeling of empathy between you and them. Battle system is hack and slash, plain and simple but technical in a sense. You see, it requires good positioning to attack your enemies, while your party members are controlled by the computer. There's no random encounters, as you can see all enemies on the areas you visit. Some missions revolve around solving certain puzzles or maneuvering one thing or another, giving the game variety. Infinite Undiscovery is highly underrated in my opinion, but just don't expect a masterpiece of some sorts. And by the way, this is yet another exclusive to the Xbox 360. Trails into Reverie. Yes, I just made a whole review of this game, but there was something important left unsaid in there. I want to talk briefly on how I feel the Trails series has been performing in the past few years and how it all connects to this game. So first, this is a final chapter in a whole saga that's been going for almost 20 years. The next saga is the one known as Kuro no Kiseki. That new series also includes some cameos and characters from this other one that ended precisely with this Reverie chapter. So did it end or not? The problem that I didn't mention in the review is connected to something that I mentioned in my podcast, a private podcast that I invite you to listen to in Patreon, link in the description. Long story short, I think this final chapter, while it's really amazing, it's once again an incorrect game to start with. I say once again because the same thing happened with Trails from Zero and Azure. It's okay to start with Zero even though you're skipping the Trails in the Sky trilogy, which you possibly are because it's the one trilogy that's not available for modern systems, not even in Japan. But obviously you can't start with Azure. So why will you start with Reverie, right? Considering it's technically the one chapter that concludes all three sagas, Sky, Crossbell and Cold Steel. Like I said in the review, it's a fanservice game, a phenomenal one, but a game that most people will find trouble getting into without having played the others. It's a game for fans that play the others. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe Falcom just released way too many interconnected sequels, and they did it in such a short amount of time. A business mistake in my opinion. But as a result, We fans got exactly what we wanted with Trails into Reverie, and that is what I didn't mention in the review. This game is a freaking masterpiece and it is stupidly strongly recommended. Shining Force. This influential strategy RPG came out initially on the Sega Genesis, and that's the version everyone knows. Of course, we can add all of its inclusions and iterations in Sega's constant compilations on other systems. It's been there on almost every single one of them, from the PS2 to the PSP to modern systems. And each version looks slightly upgraded in terms of visuals, by the way. But there's one little remake, that's right, remake, it got back in 2004 that people keep overlooking nowadays. It's called Resurrection of the Black Dragon for the Game Boy Advance. Same game, rebalanced difficulty, updated graphics, a rework on the sprites and portraits, except it has an expanded story, 3 new playable characters, one of them being able to use cards in battle. This card feature was also expanded throughout the story. You know, as much as I love the original version, I gotta go with this one. It is an excellent release that plays gracefully on the GBA. I know nowadays it's easier to play the Genesis versions in most of the collections out there, but I hope you can give this remake a try one day. The DioField Chronicle. A real-time strategy RPG with not a big budget, true, but still with extremely addictive gameplay and mature storytelling. A group of mercenaries get dragged into a war. Their goal is to stop a powerful invasion to the DioField island. You'll be sent in parties of 8, 4 active attackers and 4 support characters. Missions will be diverse in different areas, but most of the time you'll have to kill all enemies or capture their bases. It plays in real time with abilities depending on MP, each with a cooldown system. You only select the direction you want each character to move to or which enemy to attack. You can use one ability from your support roster, each being attacked to one main attacker, or you can also switch to them over time. Battles are really intense here, which is why the game's so addictive to play. And missions can often be completed within 5 or 10 minutes, unlike in most strategy RPGs. This is a criminally underrated game and one of the best modern JRPGs so far. Star Ocean: The Divine Force. After 6 years of fearing the series was done for, Tri-Ace and Square Enix partnered up again to bring it back. It was a hell of a comeback since this new entry was mind-blowing. Raymond pilots a merchant ship from his family's company, but he gets shut down for unknown reasons. After crashing in an underdeveloped planet with medieval and steampunk settings, he notices his crew is missing. He joins up with Princess Leticia to find his crew, but also help her in an upcoming war. Story might sound cliché, classic Star Ocean, but it's really well written with great character development. Gameplay involves some free and wide exploration with gorgeous graphics and even some pretty realistic visuals. Sure, there are some resolution issues, but nothing that detriments the experience. Combat is fast-paced, relying on both skills and combos depending on the character you control. But then there's Duma, the little drone thing attached to your back that can make you fly around briefly to ambush your enemies or attack them head-on quickly. Excellent battle system here, already one of my favorite games in the series. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Survivor. If you ask me if this 3DS version wouldn't exist, would I still be including the original in the video? Yes, I would, despite my everlasting complaints about the mission design and the balance. Original DS version is such a nightmare to go through, but totally worth it nonetheless. Ever played a game that is too hard, but because of how good it is, you come back to it over and over? Devil Survivor is that game for me. I played the original version when I had a small kiosk in a mall, selling retro games. You have no idea the shit this asshole put me through! I died on this mission, this other mission, tossed the DS, crossed my arms and put on an angry face. Maybe that's why some customers went away, they noticed my bad mood. I acted like a child, swearing I was never gonna touch the damn game ever again. 10 minutes later, I was playing it again like an idiot because there's gotta be a way to win this mission. So I died again and repeated the process several times. Sometimes I would spend the rest of the day without touching it for how pissed off I was, but at night I just couldn't sleep because I was already developing a strategy on how to complete this or that mission. So the next day, you guessed it, rinse and repeat. It was pretty much that way until I found a way to break the gameplay, abusing some demons and characters with over-the-top skills. So I beat it and wasted no time in starting a new playthrough right away to get all the roots and endings. When I got the 3DS port, I did the same. It feels great to beat the shit out of a brutally hard game like this, but only because it's a masterpiece. So thank you Careersoft, developers of Growlancer, for making Devil Goddamn Survival. Can't wait for the third one.